Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for standing by. Welcome to the Supercharge Your Technical Recruiting with TalentBin by Monster. During the presentation, all participants will be in a listen-only mode. Afterwards, we will conduct a question and answer. If at any time during the conference you need to reach an operator, please press *0. As a reminder, this conference is being recorded Tuesday, September 30, 2014. I would now like to turn the conference over to Peter Kazanji, founder of TalentBin. Please go ahead.
Hey, thank you very much. Hey, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for this webinar. I'm really excited to be able to share what we're doing over here at TalentBin by Monster with everyone. Just by way of introduction, I'm Pete Kazanji. I'm the founder of TalentBin, which was recently acquired by Monster in March. TalentBin is a talent search engine that helps recruiters make use of all the wonderful information that candidates are leaving all across the web in order to find them, qualify them, and engage with them, and ultimately hire them. So today we're going to be talking a little bit about exactly that. We're going to be going through a healthy amount of material here, but don't worry. The wonderful webinar team here at Monster is going to be sending these slides out to you after the fact, and I also just tweeted them out myself. You can just find me on Twitter at Peter Kazanji. Just Google Peter Kazanji, and you can see that the slides are that we're going to be going through, and I just shared those out. So with that, we're going to get this party started. So in order to understand what TalentBin is really for, you have to understand how the talent market has changed over the last 20 years. And mainly what that comes down to is how have candidates changed the way that they externalize professional information about themselves. Obviously, in the mid-'90s, it was really transformative to have job boards like Monster and Company aggregate together job postings, from the offline world to the online world where candidates can find them. Again, the challenge there, of course, being that primarily those were active candidates. LinkedIn came on the scene in the mid-2000s, whereby instead of it being an active candidate database, instead LinkedIn's approach was, hey, create a professional profile for yourself, and now out the back door, we're going to provide access to that to recruiters. That expanded the talent pool that recruiters could get access to. But at the same time, it kind of had the challenge of individuals had to actually put themselves into LinkedIn. They had to actually embellish their LinkedIn profiles. And so something that's changed over the last 10 years or so is there's actually been a growth and a distribution of more of these websites where individuals spend time engaging in professional activity online. People may joke about the fact that on Twitter you share what you had for breakfast, but at the same time you tweet about what conferences you're going to, or you follow people that are relevant to your professional interests. Or on places like Stack Overflow, a question and answer site for software engineers, you're answering questions about Ruby on Rails, or you're asking questions about iOS development. Or on places like Meetup, you're joining meetups regarding big data or Android or Java or what have you. And so on the one hand, this is really powerful. On the other hand, historically, this information has been very distributed and hard to get access to for recruiters. Ways to think about this is, these talent bits, as we kind of like to refer to them as, are distributed all over the place. They might be things like a tweet, tweets on Twitter, tweeting about Ruby on Rails, or answering a question about Java on Stack Overflow, or being a member of the San Francisco Ruby Meetup group, or even in the U.S. patent database being listed as an inventor on a patent related to Java or big data or mechanical engineering or defense or pharmaceuticals. And so these pieces of information are blown all over the web. And really what TalentBin is focused on is helping recruiters get access to that information and make use of it. So the easy way to think about what TalentBin is doing for recruiters is most recruiters are pretty familiar with LinkedIn's recruiting solutions. And if your LinkedIn Recruiter is a recruiter-facing talent search engine and lightweight candidate relationship management tool, that sits on top of the LinkedIn database. TalentBin is a recruiter-facing talent search engine that sits on top of this database of candidates that is aggregated together from the entire internet. So the way to think about TalentBin is it's kind of like LinkedIn Recruiter, but for the entire internet. But if that's one thing to walk away from this with, that's the cocktail party explanation of TalentBin, if you're at a cocktail party full of recruiters, of course. And so to understand why this matters and why this is impactful to recruiters, you have to think about how do people use LinkedIn in their day-to-day life. Folks like the people on the phone today, we're all recruiters, we're all salespeople, we're all marketers. We use LinkedIn for our professional day-to-day activity. And as such, we're fully engaged there. We're constantly embellishing our profiles. Folks who don't have a call to be using LinkedIn in their day-to-day job, like software engineers, scientists, et cetera, they're not like us. They don't have a reason to be on LinkedIn. And so as a result, on a day-to-day basis, it's not top of mind, and oftentimes that injures the completeness of their profiles. By way of example here, this is one of my account executives, Rob Perez. We use him in the slide presentation in order to give him a hard time. He used to work at LinkedIn. Now he's an account executive at TalentBin. And so his LinkedIn profile is fully embellished because he's on there all day long looking at recruiter profiles, and it stays very top of mind for him. The gentleman on the right is actually a guy that I went to college with, John Helsbad. He'll be very happy to know that he was featured on this webinar. He's actually from North Dakota, so we call him Fargo. I'll be referring to him as Fargo going forward in the call. John here obviously has a much sparser LinkedIn profile. He's a senior software engineer at Google, and so he doesn't have a lot of call to be on LinkedIn embellishing his profile. And so he has some title information, but the challenge here is that he hasn't put any skill profile information on here. So if I'm a recruiter, I have no idea if, that John is a Java engineer and a Python engineer and a JavaScript engineer because he hasn't put that on here, right? So if I look for somebody who has experience with Java and Python and JavaScript in the San Francisco Bay Area, John's not going to come back in search results, right? You can't get a search engine hit if the data is not there, right? And the data is not there because John didn't put it there. And so the problem with this is that if as recruiters, technical recruiters, get more and more specific with the searches that they're conducting on LinkedIn, right, by adding skill profile as you're supposed to do, people like John fall out of the search results, not because they don't have those skills, but because those skills aren't present on their profile. So, for instance, if you run a search in the San Francisco Bay Area on LinkedIn Recruiter for Ruby on Rails and Sinatra and jQuery, a set of technologies that are core to, for instance, Twitter. Every engineer at Twitter would probably match this criteria. You only get 300 odd results in the Bay Area. The reality is that there's thousands of people that have this skill profile in the San Francisco Bay Area. They're just not showing up in these search results because those profiles haven't been embellished. And so this kind of creates a series of problems, downstream problems for both recruiters and also for candidates. So for the recruiters, it's hard to find people who may have the criteria that you're looking for, like our buddy Fargo here, for instance. And so those folks just get missed. And so there's a false sense of scarcity as compared to the reality of the talent pool in a given geography. Conversely, the folks who are discoverable are getting constantly inundated with in-mails. And so that's creating challenges where bad in-mails that are not targeted are ignored or filed away. Even worse, in-mails are being turned off. And worst of all, candidates nuke their profiles. And so now they're just not discoverable at all. And so LinkedIn is dealing with this right now by constantly moving the ball with respect to their in-mail policy. For instance, just the other day, they announced that they were substantially changing the number of in-mails that LinkedIn Recruiter users were able to get access to on a monthly basis and no longer crediting back those that aren't responded to. So, LinkedIn has a lot of challenges in these regards. And so our response to this is, why would you ever require Fargo to go and embellish his LinkedIn profile? He's a software engineer. He's doing other things. Why don't we go and look where the candidates actually are? Why don't we go and grab that information from places like Facebook or Twitter or Quora, or GitHub or design-specific sites like Behance or Dribble and Choroflow, and pulled together, for recruiters. And so that's exactly what we do. We crawl a broad set of sites where folks engage in this sort of implicit professional activity, leaving those talent bits that we were referring to earlier around places like Facebook, Twitter, Google+, Quora, About.me, event sites like Meetups or Lanyard, which is a conference event. So, individuals who are saying, I'm attending RubyConf or Java 1. We call creative sites as well, where user experience and UI designers and graphic designers and art directors are putting their portfolios, and even things like databases of professional research or patents. But where we really shine is on the technical hiring front. We crawl a massive number of sites where individuals are engaging in software engineering related activities, like Stack Overflow is a question and answer site for software engineers. That's a big one. GitHub is a social coding site where individual software engineers follow each other's code. They fork each other's projects. They host their code to kind of show off what it is they're working on, all of which characterizes what it is that they do professionally. And so what TalentBin does is we take all that information from all those different sites, we crawl it, make sense of it, composite it together into unified profiles for those individuals, like Fargo or Cameron here, and analyze and score the activity that they're engaged in there, and then pull together all the contact vectors for those individuals, like their email address, their Twitter handle to tweet them at, their Facebook profile to message them on Facebook. Right? So we do the heavy lifting that historically recruiters have had to do by doing Boolean searching via Google with their AIRS training. We just make it a lot easier for you. And so the benefit of this, like how does this help out? The reason why it helps out is because now, instead of, when you run a search for Ruby on Rails in the San Francisco Bay Area, for instance, instead of Fargo not showing up or Cameron not showing up in those results because they didn't put Ruby on Rails on their LinkedIn profile, now we actually find them. The recruiter actually can find Fargo, can find Cameron, et cetera, et cetera. And so this is what you end up seeing is a substantial difference between the number of search results for a given query that you'll find on LinkedIn versus TalentBin in a given geography. And so, this would be one example in the Bay Area, but it's also, the case across multiple geographies, whether that's Dallas or New York or Seattle. And again, like I said, we're going to be distributing these slides later, so don't worry about scribbling this stuff down. It also works in small, kind of smaller regions as well, like, Columbus or Detroit or Denver. It also works internationally too, by virtue of the fact that these sites are naturally, they're naturally international in nature, because individuals use these for their professional use case as opposed to, in their day-to-day existence, as opposed to, viral user acquisition like, through LinkedIn. So if you look at comparisons like in Canada, for instance, the same holds true, right? If you're looking for Ruby developers in Toronto, you have a massive difference between the number of results that you're going to get. The same is true in, in Western Europe, Eastern Europe, and even, Asia Pacific. And so this is the case across a variety of technical skill profile that TalentBin crawls for. We are heavily focused on technology to start. Actually, we just shipped a number of design-centric sites, largely because those are the types of professionals who have started engaging in externalizing this information onto the web. Ultimately, we think that this is something that's going to be impactful for all knowledge workers. But right now, our real bread and butter is software engineering and design there. And so, these are the sort of things that if you're a recruiter that's looking for people who have experience with PHP or Python or Flash or front-end developers or iOS or what have you, that's where TalentBin is going to be really helpful. And so what does this actually look like in practice? And we'll see a little bit more about this in a bit when we do a live demo. But, so here's this gentleman, Alex Wayne, that we've grabbed a screenshot of his profile from LinkedIn. It's a pretty sparse profile. Obviously, this is an extreme example because, I want to look good on this on this webinar. And then here's Alex's TalentBin profile. Again, Alex didn't create this profile. We created this profile for Alex by identifying his Google Plus and Meetup and Ruby Gems and Tumblr and GitHub and Twitter and Stack Overflow, along with a number of his personal websites, and then extracting all of his skill activity from those different places. So, for instance, we know Alex is into Ruby on Rails because he's doing Ruby on Rails things on GitHub and Meetup and Ruby Gems and Stack Overflow. And specifically, we're calling out the individual actions that he's doing there. So, for instance, he's a member of the North Bay Ruby on Rails meetup. He owns or he has contributed code to a repository named Rails on GitHub. He's answered a question on Stack Overflow that's tagged with Rails, Ruby on Rails, and he's a member of the Ruby Gems community. Right? So we actually show the recruiter what it is that the individual has done that demonstrates this skill profile, rather than relying on you, necessitating you to have to run around and do that, and that saves you time. We also score the activity. So, for instance, I think this Dan gentleman right here has a very high score for AngularJS. What TalentBin is doing is it's grabbing those individual actions that Dan is doing on all those different sites. So, for instance, Dan forked a AngularJS repository on GitHub. He's a member of an AngularJS Mountain View meetup and an AngularJS San Francisco meetup, right? And he's also tagged as being interested in AngularJS on Meetup. And he's answered a question about AngularJS that has AngularJS in the title on Stack Overflow, in the question itself, on Stack Overflow, and is tagged. And so what we do is we score all that activity in order to weight that so the recruiter can quickly look at this and say, oh, this person's really into AngularJS versus, oh, this person over here is just maybe kind of into AngularJS. So the idea there is that it's helpful for recruiters to hone in and target the folks that are going to be more interested in the opportunities that they're presenting. And so we do that for all of their skill profile and pull it all together into that profile and allow you to search across that. One of the other things that we allow you to do is, while we're aggregating all this information together, we also pull together other interests. So, for instance, people aren't just members of AngularJS meetups on meetup.com, but they're members of other meetups too, or they've liked certain things on Facebook. And so a good example of this would be this Alex Wayne gentleman, he's as a member of the StarCraft meetup on meetup.com. And so, he's also into skiing as well, probably for a similar reason. And so the reason why this is very helpful is because it helps recruiters engage with individuals in a way that demonstrates that the recruiter has done his homework and raises response rates from those individuals. So if I were to go and email Alex here, send him a personal email to his email address that we've pulled together, where the title mentions something about like what's more fun, playing StarCraft or squishing bugs in Ruby, he's going to open that email, right? That's the sort of email. And so historically, that would be a time-consuming exercise to go and find that information, but TalentBin has pulled it right there for you so you can act on it. We also pull job information too. But all of this wonderful candidate intelligence isn't particularly useful without the ability to engage with the individual to reach out and present an opportunity. And so in that regard, TalentBin also pulls together all available contact information for those individuals, primarily email address being one of the most impactful methods, but also social communication as well. So you could tweet somebody, you could message them on Facebook or Meetup. We also have a large offshore team of researchers who are constantly adding more email addresses to our database. We have about 50 to 60% coverage on high value search queries. But then for those that we don't, we also have an email concierge feature where if for whatever reason a profile doesn't have an email address on it, you can click request email. It'll go to that research team, and within a couple of days, it'll be returned back to you. And we have about a 70% hit rate across tens of thousands of those requests. So this is what a TalentBin profile looks like, right? By aggregating together all that information. So the question then is, what does this get me? What can I do with this? And really what that comes down to is it comes down to four main value propositions. It comes down to finding candidates that other recruiting organizations can't find, getting a full 360-degree view of the individual to qualify and start the conversation, the ability to reach out using all available vectors in a scaled and impactful fashion, and then staying on top of the candidates with pipeline management and automation. So we're going to touch on some of those here. So first of all, all of those profiles that have been pulled together for Alex and Fargo and Cameron, they're all put into that database, which is then searchable across. So the same way that you would search a resume database, or you're familiar with searching LinkedIn Recruiter, you can do the same thing with TalentBin, where you could put in Ruby on Rails plus jQuery plus Redis in the San Francisco Bay Area, and then TalentBin will return the aggregated profiles, the composite profiles that match those. You can also do more involved kind of visual Boolean searches as well, and even TalentBin also has semantic searching functionality as well, insofar as if you want to search for NoSQL, for instance, TalentBin already has a bunch of existing what we call query expansion explode rules, where when you search for NoSQL, we're actually searching for a bunch of synonyms like Cassandra and Couchbase, CouchDB, Dynamo, because requiring individual recruiters to remember all of those strings is kind of, it's a lot. So finding and searching is number one. Second is getting a full 360-degree view of the candidate. So we don't want any more Codys, people nuking their profiles and saying like, oh, I don't want any more emails. Really what it comes down to is it's not that engineers and candidates don't want to see opportunities. They just don't want to see irrelevant opportunities, right? And so that's the idea here, is that by having the professional interests and also other interests that are provided to the recruiters, you can easily sort in customized messaging. The entire outreach doesn't have to be customized. In fact, the entire outreach is largely templated, but with just a little bit of customization, you can double or triple your response rate. So, an example here is just by quickly customizing this outreach here. One of our users out of 10 emails to customize emails ended up with, I think it was 3 or 4 phone screens that came out of it, and an individual who, while wasn't interested in a role right now, was happy to refer other people and keep in touch. And all of this was a result of the recruiter in question, focusing on the fact that this individual really likes sriracha and salt bagels, and this individual right here really enjoyed, I think it was board games, Carcassonne and Agricola, right? Because that's the sort of activity that shows candidates that that you have their best interest in mind, and you've done the heavy lifting to target them for a relevant opportunity. Similarly, if you one of our customers engaged in did some analytics on their outreach, and out of 100 targeted emails sent, that drove to 60 opens. We'll get into this later, but TalentBin has open and click tracking in the integrated email functionality. 27 replies that drove to 10 phone screens and eventually 1 hire. Right, so about half a week's worth of sourcing and outreach drove 1 incremental tech hire in a really, in a heavyweight, high demand environment. Thirdly, you can reach out using all the available contact information. And so TalentBin has really invested heavily in automation and streamlining your ability not just to find individuals like we covered before, and not just to have, to automate and simplify the aggregation of information such that you can do better high-quality outreach, but also the outreach itself. So like we noted before, we pull together all this contact information for you, but what can you do with it? Well, as noted, TalentBin has an integrated email system. We integrate with Outlook, Google Apps for Enterprise. Essentially anything that is IMAP compliant, TalentBin will integrate with. And so the idea there is that when you find Cameron or Fargo or whoever, and you want to send them a quick email that you can customize, rather than having to, retype the whole thing, it's already templated. It's going to mail merge their name, your name, the hyperlink to your jobs page, et cetera, et cetera. And so you can spend your time executing kind of that customization and in order to raise response rates. You can do the same thing with social communication as well. So the idea here is that when you go and spawn one of these templates, it'll merge in everything for you. All communication will be tracked in the TalentBin instance. on the profile, so you can actually see how many messages have been being sent. Further, we have a mass mailing functionality as well, where you can message up to 30 candidates at a time, again with full mail merge functionality. And this is less for kind of initial outreach, because in that initial outreach, you really want to demonstrate to the candidate how they've been qualified and why the opportunity is qualified for them. But this is really helpful for, keeping, maybe 100 people that are in a future opportunity state warm, for instance. This is something that kind of is a further extension of that, is an automated follow-up system that we just released the other day. Really what it comes down to is that with passive candidate recruiting, the first outreach to an individual candidate probably may not be sufficient. That for, if you send 100 emails, maybe depending on the level of customization and kind of quality of your messaging, maybe you'll get a 10, 20, 30% follow-up, response rate. But even with a 30% response rate, you still are missing those other 70. And so what that typically is required is individual recruiters to go back and send follow-up messages. Well, we kind of thought, why don't we just help recruiters do that for them automatically? And so we built something that we call automated follow-up. It's essentially the sort of drip marketing campaigns that you would see in marketing and sales automation software. But in this case, when you go and send that first email to Ignacio, say, for instance, here, there's a little checkbox underneath that allows you to add Ignacio after that first email to an automatic follow-up campaign, where we have templates that are in there that you can customize ahead of time, such that you send your first email to Ignacio. If he doesn't get back to you 3 days later, he's going to get a second email. It's more generic, obviously, because it's shared across multiple candidates. But it's essentially, it will just show up as a reply to the prior email, right? And if Ignacio doesn't get back to you at that point, 7 days later, he's going to get another email saying, "Hey, did you see my other message?" And then lastly, there's going to be kind of a last follow-up that says, that essentially says, "Hey, looks like this isn't a fit for you. I'm going to close the book on this." And then it automatically puts Ignacio from an attempting to contact state into a non-interested state. And so the idea here is to drive efficiency for recruiters without having to drive more labor, right? That's the key. That's the name of the game, and what TalentBin is working on for recruiters. And with all of this messaging functionality, all this integrated email, every message that is sent is actually instrumented with open tracking and click tracking. So every message that you send to Ignacio or Fargo or Cameron or what have you, any hyperlink that's in there has been instrumented. There's a tracking pixel in there. And so the idea there is that if you send 100 emails to individuals and maybe 20 get back to you, you've got your other 80. Well, where do you start with those 80? Well, what you should do is you would start with the ones who have opened your email and who have clicked on the hyperlink, say, to the job posting that you put in there. And that way you're spending your time working closer to the money, right? Working closer to the money and working on people who are a higher likelihood to eventually, become a hire, whether that's in a commercial environment, become a hire on your team, or in a staffing environment, become a placement and a fee, right? So that's why we have that open and click tracking in there. And so you can actually see that happening real time when individuals go and open your email or click on a hyperlink. It'll actually show up in TalentBin so you can see the individual and engage with them, as quickly as possible in order to drive them down the funnel. Our templated communication also works with social messaging too. So, for instance, if you send somebody an email and that vector isn't necessarily working, there's all sorts of other places where you can engage with them, whether that's messaging on Meetup or maybe Quora or Facebook or even LinkedIn perhaps. Right? If you have somebody with an undiscoverable LinkedIn profile that looks terrible, like our friend Alex, maybe sending them an email is actually not a bad idea, because guess what? You're probably not getting a lot of those emails. And the beauty of social communication is that it goes to places where people are. So when somebody messages you on Facebook, it shows up in your Facebook inbox. When somebody tweets at you, right, it shows up on your phone, in your pocket, buzzing you. right? Which is definitely not the case with regards to things like in-mails, for instance. Obviously, email is, the number one approach here, but social messaging is really compelling as well, and it's something that TalentBin is going to be further investing in to automate the ability to do social outreach too. And then all of this is instrumented and has reporting. Lastly, what TalentBin helps individuals do, in addition to streamlining and simplifying the discovery process, the aggregation of information to give you a heavily qualified view, and outreach functionality is the ability to stay on top of your pipeline, because recruiters are busy people. They have lots of demands on their time. And so ensuring that you don't drop balls, because we all do it, ensuring that you don't drop balls that result in either a missed fee if you're in staffing, or a missed hire if you're in commercial and enterprise environment is obviously very important, especially in highly competitive technical recruiting space. And so TalentBin has invested pretty heavily there in order to help you not have those issues. So one of the big things that we've implemented is a thing that we call intelligent CRM, where essentially what we allow you to do is we show you the exact actions that you can take based on the implicit activity that candidates have taken with your outreach. So, for instance, if somebody's responded back to you and you haven't responded to them, we're going to tell you, right? Maybe the email got lost. Like, that happens, right? But we've got your back here, and you won't. Or if somebody has, if our buddy Ignacio that we emailed has been clicking on your email, but you haven't followed up with him, well, gosh, we're going to tell you that so you can go and you can follow up with him and say, hey, let's get on a call, right? Because obviously he wouldn't be clicking on the hyperlink to the job posting 3 times if he wasn't a little interested in hearing what you had to say. Or, hey, Galen has opened your email. So what we do is we allow you to see that right there and take rapid action with templating, with follow-up, help you drive those candidates down the funnel. Similarly, a lot of the CRM functionality is automated. So, for instance, as somebody who runs a sales organization, I'm very familiar with people get busy and they have a tendency to forget to take this candidate and move them into I'm attempting to contact them, or they're in a submitted state. TalentBin does a lot of that for you. So if you reach out to a candidate, great, because the email is integrated. We already know that they're in attempting to contact state. If the candidate responds back to you, even better. Now they're in an in-discussion state, right? So rather than requiring recruiters to do all sorts of annoying bookkeeping and clicking, instead you can spend your time doing activities that actually, drive candidates down the funnel. Yes, we do have, your traditional CRM functionalities around adding notes and kind of putting into different stages and so on and so forth. Ability to see who else in your organization is looking at a candidate or maybe taking action on them, and pipeline management. But our goal here is really, at the end of the day, to minimize the amount of busy work that recruiters have to do, and instead automate a lot of that and let recruiters instead spend their time on the things that only recruiters can do, which is persuasion, high-impact candidate communication, so on and so forth. So those are a lot of that's kind of the summation of the TalentBin value proposition. There's the finding candidates, getting a full view of them, reaching out and staying on top of your pipeline. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of show you guys what this looks like live here. So I'm going to flip over here. Oh, that's my Twitter profile instead. As noted, if anyone joined late, I tweeted out earlier the slides from this webinar. So if you want to get access to those, also our lovely webinar team is going to be sending these out later. But I'm going to go ahead and close myself up there. So if you want it, so this is what the TalentBin interface looks like. As noted, there, if I wanted to look for somebody who has experience with Ruby on Rails, and again, as noted previously, we have, there's a semantic functionality here where when you search for Ruby, we're also going to search for a variety of synonyms for Ruby. So let's say I'm just looking for a typical kind of web developer on a Ruby stack. I would say, I'd like to have them have experience with Ruby and JavaScript, and let's say that this is going to be in like the Dallas area, for instance. What this can do is this is going to go ahead and run a search across. Go back to the slide. our database of composite profiles, right? So the same, and pull back these individuals right here. So for instance, here's Burin right here. We can see previews of all these individuals. Sam De La Garza here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area has experience with, JavaScript, Ruby, CoffeeScript, jQuery, Ruby on Rails. And we pulled that information from Sam's Stack Overflow, GitHub, LinkedIn, Facebook, SourceForge, Google+, Twitter, and Vimeo accounts, for instance, here. In addition to that, if we want to get more detailed with our searching, say, for instance, we said, you know what, as long as they have experience with a modern scripting language, that's cool. So this is our visual Boolean functionality here, where you can add or clauses across, and then add and clauses up and down. So maybe a second keyword here might be JavaScript here. So it's saying, hey, any of these guys right here, and then moreover, from a location standpoint, maybe it's anywhere on the West Coast. So Portland, San Francisco Bay Area, Seattle, maybe Los Angeles, for instance. And so what this is doing is this is searching for folks that have experience with PHP or Python or Ruby, JavaScript, and in any of those geos. And actually, if I wanted to, let's say that, because that's a lot of candidates right there, I'm going to start with people that have email addresses, because I want to take full advantage of. So as you saw, it was 80,000 and now it's 45,000. So again, like I said, it's a little north of 50% email address coverage. But let's get even more detailed here. Let's say, I only want people to have GitHub or Stack Overflow profiles, for instance, because what I want to do is I want to be able to maybe click out to their individual profiles and kind of see what's going on. Okay, I've got about 40,000 here. Right, and so what I can do is I can go through these individuals and kind of go shopping for candidates here, knowing that we've pulled together all of this, all of this activity for these individuals. So, this gentleman right here, Calvin Freitas from Seattle, right? We have that he currently works at Amazon. He came there from the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. Looks like, he has experience with ActionScript, ASP, C#, C++, et cetera here. We have some of his job history as well. And so if I thought Calvin looked interesting, what I could do is I could go ahead and flip him here into a promising state, right? I can also just do this straight from the search UI here. So if somebody looked interesting, I could flip them into a promising state. And what that's going to do is that's going to go ahead and put these gentlemen into my pipeline here for, my senior Ruby developer role. So in this case, what I'm going to do here is look for individuals who have our tag as promising that I've kind of been shopping for, and now those folks are in here. And so, for instance, if I wanted to reach out to Derek here, right, because he's in a promising state, I haven't gone and engaged in outreach with him, I could go ahead and use my integrated email functionality here to go ahead and send him template number 1. So as you can see, it's all merged in. Hi, Derek. We think you're pretty awesome. All of these templates can be modified as you see fit, right? And so in this case, maybe what I might want to do here is check out some of his other things that Derek is interested in. It looks like he's into Lady Gaga, which is awesome. He follows Lady Gaga on Quora, so maybe I would say something about that in my outreach. Looks like he's really into entrepreneurship, et cetera, et cetera. And so when I go and reach out to Derek, maybe what I might do is I'll take this generic message right here, and I might customize it right here to speak to his specific professional interests, and maybe even his personal interests. And when I go to send this message, what I would probably do is add him to an automated follow-up campaign, such that, as noted before, if Derek doesn't get back to me on my first outreach, right, he'll be staged in a campaign where he'll get this secondary follow-up here 3 days later, right? If he doesn't respond back to me, he would get he would get another one 7 days after that, right? And the idea there is that rather than me having to constantly cycle back and look at my folks who are, for instance, attempting to contact state and follow up with them manually. Instead, TalentBin is doing it for you automatically. And so you're essentially getting more credit for that, for the sourcing you've done, for the initial outreach you've done. You're getting more credit and having that force multiplied through multiple messages that show up in the individuals as replies to your original outreach. And so while all of that's happening, of course, all of that activity is instrumented. So the opens, clicks, responses are all tracked. And so if I come to my dashboard, I get my morning coffee and show up on my TalentBin dashboard, it's going to tell me exactly what's going on, that I have an overdue task, right? If I set a manual task for myself, but also importantly, it's less about manually setting tasks, manually moving things around, and instead it's helping you make use of implicit activity like, hey, Pete, you responded to an email from Christine Hong, who's a candidate, and you haven't responded back to it. You might want to get on that, right? Or, hey, it's a great time to follow Juan Luis. You messaged him previously, and he clicked on your email. So what you can do is you can quickly just go to the thread in question and then send a follow up email to Juan, because that he's been clicking on your stuff. So you can quickly just go through and boom, boom, and this will be retired, right? And so that's the idea here, is that what we want to do is we want to make things as easy as possible for individual recruiters, to automate their workflow and not have to, do manual kind of annoying things day to day. So that's some of the technical recruiting. The other thing I thought I might, the other thing that I thought I might show you is kind of the same notion with regards to kind of design, art direction, et cetera, et cetera. We've crawled a number of sites that are specific to design and user interface design, graphic design, art direction, things like that. And specifically, as related to individuals who have profiles on places like Dribbble or Behance, right? And so one of the things actually we're about to ship is portfolio previews. So, for instance, this gentleman, Vince Lane here, we know that he's into art direction. I think that's, did I search for that or no? I searched for UI. We know that he's into UI design because he engages in UI activity on Meetup. Similarly, he's done things on Dribbble. And so what we're going to be doing here in the short term is pulling in previews of the individual activity, portfolio activity, the same way that we pull in these interest previews here. We're going to be pulling in those portfolio previews as well. So you as a recruiter will be able to look at Vince here. You'll be able to look at all of his activities. This gentleman looks like a very well-rounded, awesome candidate. And then also be able to see some of his work product, again, through no action on Vince's part. So that's a little bit of a live demo there. And so, this is all about recruiters having hard jobs and being a very kind of, impacted recruiting environment right now, especially for in-demand roles like technical recruiting and, UI, UX, design, data science, all those sort of things. Essentially, all of those things that we talked about up here, it's a very, you all know that you have tough jobs. And so TalentBin is focused on making you successful, not just from the standpoint of like, yeah, we can build whizzy technology, and that's what our engineers do. They're not on LinkedIn. They're building whizzy technology just like all other engineers. But, whizzy technology is not necessarily sufficient by itself. And so in that regard, we actually have a really large customer success implementation and investment. We have a 10-person customer success organization that is focused not just on like, hey, here's this, we're going to train you, and then you're off to the races. Good luck. But instead, it's a lot of proactive customer success, a lot of hands-on implementation, a lot of learning, and a lot of monitoring there, in addition to award-winning self-serve support resources. Actually, our team is being featured at Salesforce's Dreamforce conference happening next week, I guess, for a lot of the cool technology that they've built on in order to drive customer success. And so then the question is, okay, well, why would talent, aside from all these, all this great stuff that we've gone through here, and again, all this will be shared with you via the slides that our webinar team will distribute out, and also that I've tweeted out. Why is this something that might be helpful to you? And really, what it comes down to is, hundreds of technical recruiting organizations utilize TalentBin, from the very large to from the very large and the very kind of like hyper modern to the very large and maybe kind of like more traditional, to staffing organizations like with hundreds of recruiters, to small kind of mom and pop staffing organizations, kind of boutique staffing organizations as well. And the idea here is that really we're focused on helping recruiters, if you're a one-man show, helping you automate your life, like automate the parts that would otherwise take you, a whole day. Now you can do in 30 minutes. If you're a large organization that is focused on, pipelining across variety of talent, geographies, both within the United States or maybe outside the United States, helping there. And so, TalentBin has actually been, as noted previously, we were acquired by Monster in March or so. And before that, we were an independent entity that myself and my co-founder, Jason HiDef, had founded. And so this isn't really a new offering. We've been we've been around the block for a good 3 years. We've been covered by, all manner of press, from, the EREs and the SourceCons of the world. You maybe have caught some of the writing that I do for SourceCon. We're covered by all the analysts out there, from Gartner to, to Forrester to Burson. We've won a number of awards, including the HR Tech Awesome New Technology Award, which I always find to be the awesomest name of an award, to being named as a cool vendor by Gartner. And then before we were purchased by Monster, we were actually backed by a number of top flight venture capital organizations, like the one that the VC that backed Uber, for instance, or Twitter, for instance, or Groupon, for instance. So TalentBin isn't really, it isn't a new offering per se. It's definitely, we've been around the block, but it is helping recruiters take advantage of this massive shift in what's going on, with talent online. So we covered a lot. I probably talked pretty fast. Again, this is going to be not only is this recorded and will be shared with you, but the slides will be shared with you too. So if you missed something, it'll be available there, and you can share it with your teams. For instance, if folks weren't able to make it today and you were sitting in on behalf of a larger technical recruiting organization, feel free to share this information around. As noted, I tweeted this out. I tweeted the slides out earlier. They're available right there. And so with that, what I am going to do now is I'm going to flip back to Q&A right now. So let me go ahead and do that. I'm going to open up the Q&A thing here. Okie dokie. Click. All right. Cool. So I'm going to answer some questions. Is the quality of a potential job candidate's constant output weighted in the skills interest score? If so, how? Thanks for the awesome question. It's so well written. Yes, totally. One of the things, it definitely is weighted. One of the things, let's go back to that slide here. Excuse me. One of the things that's kind of always interesting about resumes and kind of LinkedIn profiles by extension is that they're very, they're self-reported. And they're also kind of static. Like if I say that I'm into Ruby, like I do Ruby on Rails, it's kind of like, okay, did you maybe just do like one class at like a hackathon, or have you been doing it forever, right? And so one of the things that's nice about the social data aggregation here is that you can pull together the activity from across a variety of different sites and score them. So for instance here, this Dan gentleman, as noted before, he's rated as a 99 in AngularJS because that's the highest score we'll give with regard to somebody having lots of AngularJS activity. And the reason why is because not only is he engaged in a lot of it, but also the activity that he's doing is more indicative of expertise. So if somebody tweets about AngularJS once, and only once, that might be interesting, right? But it's by no means as interesting as somebody who tweets about it 50 times and has it in their Twitter bio and has answered a question about AngularJS and is a member of 2 AngularJS meetups and also follows a bunch of AngularJS repositories on GitHub. So the answer to your question is definitely. Cool. So then there was another question from Jeff Altman here. It looks like the strength is on the application side rather than infrastructure. Is that correct? I just want to make sure I understand so I'm unrealistic expectations. Awesome question. You guys rock. The focus is really with regard to these sort of core technologies here. Historically, our emphasis has been on the software development side, so individuals who are writing .NET applications or C++ applications or Flash applications or iOS or Ruby applications. With that being said, the data sources that we crawl do have those other things as well. So, for instance, there's a site called ServerFault. It's like a sister site of Stack Overflow, and those are all network engineers, NetOps, DevOps people who are working on things like Puppet or, I'm having a brain fart, Puppet or Chef, or configuring servers and what have you, which would definitely count as the infrastructure side, or individuals who are administering SharePoint or Salesforce or what have you. Those individuals ask and answer questions regarding, Apex code, which is, what Salesforce administrators oftentimes spend their time writing a lot of kind of scripts in. Is it as powerful as, our coverage on things like Ruby or iOS or Python or Java? No, it's not as powerful. That said, it does exist, and it can be valuable there, especially with all the workflow and messaging functionality and kind of contact information that sits on top of that, and it's only going to get better as well. There are a variety of other kind of more infrastructure-centric sites. Good example of that would be one called, actually I can't remember right now, but infrastructure-specific sites like message boards and forums and so on and so forth, and that's something that's kind of on our list. We're actually adding, 1 or 2 new data sources every other week, right? So that's something that's definitely in there right now, and is more and more that we're going to be focused on. The way to think about what it is that we do is, if you engage in quote-unquote knowledge work, where the work that demonstrates your professional capacity ends up online, we want to crawl all that, whether that's patents or publications or papers that have been given or even tweets. All of that is digital, like digital work product of, either of an informal or a formal sort. And, we want to make use of that to help recruiters find the folks that traditionally, you'd have to steal a membership directory from some professional organization or to have access to those folks. Well, a lot of that stuff's available online now, or maybe in an offline database format, and we're going to bring it online for you. I expect a lot of coverage. Oh, Jeff again. All right, I'm going to answer Jeff's question because it's really good. I expect a lot of coverage for big cities. What about places like Norman, Oklahoma, Asheville, North Carolina, a smaller U.S. city? And the answer, great question. It's always important to make sure that somebody who's doing a demo isn't kind of like snowing you. And my response to that is that, yes, by virtue of the fact that, these software engineers engage in, if you ask any software engineer about GitHub, they're going to know about it. If you ask any software engineer about Stack Overflow, they're going to know about it. If you ask them about Meetup, they're going to know about it. Like Java user group meetups or Java user groups use meetup.com as their infrastructure for facilitating their meetup. So, the Norman, Oklahoma Java meetup, there definitely is one, I'm sure, right? Or Asheville. I love Asheville, actually. It's beautiful. Those individuals will be there, and moreover, what's actually really kind of fascinating is that LinkedIn has a tendency to be very bi-coastal in nature, because that's where it kind of started out in the Silicon Valley and then spread to New York. And so in kind of places in the middle of the country, it has a tendency to have less penetration there. So that's definitely the case. So there's a gentleman here who, Brian, so Brian asked, Monster is integrated with our ATS. When you see point of cancer, very easy with TalentBin to be integrated with our ATS. We want communication to flow via our ATS, not through parallel CRM and TalentBin marketing. Totally understand what you're saying there, Brian. This is obviously the case pretty heavily with regards to a lot of staffing agencies as well. And the response to that is that yes, you definitely can export profiles from TalentBin. You can push them into your ATS via PDF or CSV. We actually have a variety of, here, I can just show you rather than speaking to it. Sorry, it's better to show. Here you go. You can push it across a wire into Bullhorn, into Avature, into iSIMS, et cetera, and that's easy enough to do. One thing I didn't show you guys, which is kind of cool, related to this, is we also have a Chrome plugin that allows you to get access to TalentBin kind of profiles on the go. Here, it works on pretty much any social site that you end up with. So if you're on GitHub and you're sourcing, or if you're on Stack Overflow and you're sourcing, you decide that you actually want to do some browsing instead of sourcing through TalentBin, you can do this. This Chrome plugin here works with a number of ATSs as well. So, for instance, if you're in Bullhorn and you're looking at a candidate object, it'll show up. It'll show up there too, and so which is helpful as regards to your question, because if you want to execute outreach and you want to raise your response rates and you want to raise your open rates, and you might want to use some of that social data to do that, it's nice to have access to it right there in your ATS in question. All right, I'll do one last question here. Excuse me, because we're kind of wrapping up, but all of these questions are phenomenal. I'm sorry that I wasn't able to answer them all. We had a lot of data, a lot of information to cover, but I'm sure that everyone here has a dedicated Monster sales representative that they are familiar with, and I have a whole team of former TalentBin sales professionals that are largely former technical recruiters that are happy to do a more in-depth demonstration for you. So one last question here. All right, this is an easy one. Umberto Suarez asked, can we use our Monster login or is TalentBin a separate service? Great question, Umberto, because having to remember yet another password is a huge pain. And TalentBin is integrated with your Monster account, right? So, you would go, if you wanted to go and log into TalentBin, I'll show you right now. If you wanted to go and log into TalentBin, you would just go ahead and log in, and it would show, and you're right here, you're logging in with your Monster account. Similarly, if you're on hiring.monster.com and you're logged in, actually, I can show you this right now. If you're on your hiring.monster account, and you have, apparently I'm not signed in, whoops, TalentBin would be listed under your resume search, right? It's a separate product from, your Power Resume search or what have you, but it would be, you would go to hiring.monster.com, and, you could go from Power Resume search directly to TalentBin really easily by being logged in at the same time, with the same credentials. Thank you for the very important kind of nuts and bolts question there, Humberto. Great. So I think that's about it. I really appreciate everyone's time. I hope this was educational. And the one thing I will kind of leave you with is that really what it is that what we're focused on is those core 4 value propositions of helping you find folks by making use of the social activity, giving you the best data to qualify and engage, and providing you with a number of automation tools to make outreach and pipeline management and follow-up and avoid drop balls. And so this is what we have right now, but importantly, the reason why Monster purchased TalentBin was to continue to expand this. And so we've doubled the size of our engineering team over the last few months in order to raise the tempo of sites that we crawl and features that we're able to ship. And so this is only the beginning of this. We're planning on moving into other verticals as well, outside of technical, outside of design, so on and so forth. Again, our belief is that if an individual, if it's a knowledge worker who engages in, who creates digital professional activity, eventually that will come online. Eventually that will be able to be digitized, and we want to bring it to you as a recruiter to make your life easier. So with that, thank you very much. And as noted, the webinar team will be distributing this out, these slides out to everyone. And if you don't want to wait that long, you can go and grab it off my Twitter profile here. I put these slides up as a hyperlink on my Twitter profile. So thank you very much. Have a great day.
Ladies and gentlemen, that does conclude the conference call for today. We thank you for your participation and ask that you please disconnect your lines.